You are listening to Something Rather Than Nothing. Creator and host, Ken Vellante. Editor and producer, Peter Bauer.
Hey everybody, this is Ken Vellante with the Something Rather Than Nothing podcast, and I'm really excited to have Keenan Marshall Keller and Alex Delaney on the show. Before you're going to hear their voices, I want to tell you about their new comic series, Vengeance is for the Living, in 4 parts. Here's a description of the first issue, and it's an issue I loved and folks have really enjoyed. Shelia Knox awakes from a 2-week coma to find her life torn apart. Her children have been savagely murdered. Her husband is missing. Her hand completely mangled and her throat slit to within inches of her jugular, leaving her with nothing left to live for. So when the men responsible for taking her and her family come after her to try and finish the job, they unwittingly let loose an angel of death, hell-bent on hunting down those responsible and making them all pay. Damn. Yep. All right. Vengeance is for the living. And I was thinking about this show. There's just something I feel like times feel weird, like politics feels weird, things feel weird. Need to clear some space for vengeance. For when folks have been so horrifically wrong. I wanted to ask you. I saw a great video in Comic Lounge covering the first issue, and I recommend that to folks on YouTube to get a little look-see at Vengeance is for the Living. Where did this project come from? I've enjoyed your work separately over the years, and seeing this unholy, wonderful combination of you two and your talents. Where did this project come from? Tell us a little bit about Vengeance is for the Living.
Do you want to start, Keenan, or do you want me to?
I'm sure. I mean, it started back when Tom, Neely, and I were on the first tour for the Humans. And we were going up the West Coast to go to like Rose City or one of those cons. And we were doing some in-stores. And the night before the Floating World show, we did it in Arcane Comics in Seattle. And that place is awesome. And I saw the derelict on the wall. And I was like, what's that? It just kind of struck me. And I pulled it off the wall. And I was instantly like, I'm buying this. Who is it? He's like, oh, it's some guy up in Portland. But I was instantly in love with it and talking to Tom about it all night. And then the next night in Portland, Alex came to our signing at Floating World.
Oh, yeah.
And that's when we just started talking. I was like, holy shit, you're this guy. He was like, yeah. And then they had his other comic at Floating World. So I got that there, other side of town. And we just started a friendly relationship. And then he was like, you ever want to work on something together? And I pitched him like 4 or 5 like ideas. And he was like, that one. And that was Vengeance. So.
Wonderful. And Alex, the derelict, it is striking. It is like, I saw you work, Alex, and I was like, holy shit, like I want this stuff. Alex, about your connection and, meeting up with Keenan and working on Vengeance.
Yeah. When, I don't really ever get jealous of comics that people put out. But when I initially saw The Humans, I was like, fuck, that's a really cool comic. Man, I wish I could do something with that. These guys, like I knew Tom already from Stump Towns and Henry and Glenn and stuff like that. But I hadn't met Keenan before. And I was just like, man, they've got something really special going with this book. And so, when they were coming to town, I was like, hell yeah, I'm going to go and at least say hi and, talk comics with him, if I can. And, so anyway, it just kind of started off really natural conversation, like Keenan was saying. And, as we talked more and, started putting some, the wheels in motion for, what does this book look like, and it went through several different kind of iterations. It's like, okay, now it's going to change this part a little bit, or these things. But the vision was pretty clear from the start as far as like what kind of aesthetics we wanted to bring to this.
Yeah.
if you're not into like hardcore grindhouse flicks, ultra violence, it's probably not the book for you. But if you like those things, if you enjoy that kind of entertainment, that also has, there's a lot of heart to this story too. People get caught up on a lot of the brutality of it, but this is a very human story too. And it was really exciting to kind of dive into that. Keenan's an awesome writer and creator. So it was just like a no-brainer. I mean, I'd always kind of done my own thing. I'd worked with people in the past with, not as exciting results, maybe, I might say, for some of those interactions. But with Keenan, it was just like everything felt very natural. I think a lot of things we think about very similarly. We have some similar touch points as far as like influences or things that really appeal to us. So,
and we have a similar sense of humor too.
Yeah, very much so. It worked out really well. And, the communication was always fine with this book. I feel like it was just kind of like, hey, what if we did this, or this part needs to, be adjusted or something like that. It was a very good working relationship, and, also really good friendship too. So,
yeah. Thanks for that backdrop. Talking Floating World and the publisher. I've done this show.
Mm-hmm.
I've done this show for over 5 years, and I've had a lot of fun with it. Art, philosophy, a lot of comic creators. For me, what you find in the work that you do and folks do, there's this world right there that people adore and love. And I think with Floating World, and Alex, I know, you can regularly find actually both of your comics there at Floating
Mm-hmm.
World Comics in Lloyd Center in Portland. I've talked about that shop and publisher a few times on the show because I've had great creators who they work with, the high quality of the print, the gorgeous color, and seeing the artwork and seeing this creation. Just like there's an attention to the detail as creators and as publishers that is like, that's what they have. And so I even recorded one episode with an artist outside of Floating World for the ambiance of the Lloyd Center, which is this
sure.
The zombie mall coming back to life with idiosyncratic stores and ice skating, and
totally.
Tanya Harding, I think, used to skate over there way back when, for that dated reference for the figure skating. But
really?
Yes. So Tanya Harding, I believe, trained, of course, the famous figure skater depicted in I, Tanya, skated at, there was facilities over by Clackamas, I believe what they call Clackamas Town Center now, and the Lloyd Center. She used to practice. Okay. And a graduate of Milwaukee High School, where Alex has spent some time. So a little bit of the cultural history there. But
yes.
with Floating Worlds as the publisher, big plug for them. So I wanted to ask you, we'll tell folks we're recording here in fall, near autumn, September 2024, and the recency of the issue number 4 for Vengeance for the Living coming out right now. Without giving away details, can you just mention about like the series as a whole, and with the new issue out? Either one, maybe Keenan.
Sure. It's issue 3 that's just coming out right around
now. Oh, I'm sorry,
now.
Issue 3.
No, it's fine. Yeah. Issue 4 will be coming out in December because we staggered it every 3 months. So
awesome.
But yeah, I mean, I'm not sure exactly what you'd want me to say about the series. You just want me to? I mean, it's a 3. So far, we had 3 issues out of 4, and each one's progressively gotten bigger, with more story, more pages, until we're coming out with the 4th one in December. But right now, the 3rd issue's out, which is probably, I mean, each one I love more and more because Alex, like, his work just blossomed with each issue. And so this third issue's got some of my favorite spreads. And he spent a lot of time designing Limbos, which is the arcade that is the setting for a lot of the issue. And I'm just blown away by those series of pages and how much fun it was to because every video game in the arcade is a reference to a comic book or a creator, basically. So
wonderful.
Yeah, that's one of the things I'm most excited about this issue. Just coloring it was a nightmare because there's so much.
Sorry about that.
But it came out great.
Tell us, color was a nightmare. That was one of the more striking features, and like I mentioned with that video there, just like that, and but it was a difficult process for you, Keenan. It was enjoyable. It was great to learn because I've never colored another artist's work before, and it's just nerve wracking because Alex's work's so good, and all I don't want to do is fuck it up. I just don't want. I don't want to ruin it or muddy the intentions or the tone and stuff like that. So it's just a lot, thinking on a lot of levels. And it just took a lot of time because I'm like an ape with a tool. I'm and I was using my little mouse pad with my fingers because my tablet wasn't working. So I colored the last two issues just on my little, laptop finger mouse. Yeah. Hey, I wanted to chat a bit, kick around the conceptual. I was going to ask you, Alex, about your connection to being an artist. Was there a moment for you that you felt that you were an artist, or were you like a little kid? You were born, you had a crayon, and we're drawing, and writing, or what? So what? When did you see yourself as an artist?
Pretty much in my teens, we always we always had art supplies and things like that growing up. My dad was an abstract impressionist that kind of quit making things once he had kids. But he always brought things around for us to try out. So that kind of just lent itself into, this is something I've always liked doing, drawing, and it just kept progressing. And, art classes, things like that. But I guess I've kind of always seen myself as that. It's always kind of been in my life. I've always thought about art. And always gravitated towards artistic things. So I guess it's just naturally instilled there and then developed.
Yeah. Keenan, what about yourself? I mean, was it a moment type of thing, or?
Well, maybe. I was always drawn to create. I was always creative as a kid. In my teens probably is when it started flourishing. Because as a kid, as a younger child, I'd scribble and draw, but my older sister was such a great artist that I was just I can't. She could look at something and draw it, and I was I can't fucking do that. So my really concept of art was about my ability to render something, not about anything deeper than that. But as I got older, I started thinking about art differently. But it wasn't until I think I met my wife, and she saw how much I drew all the time, and I had all these little story fragments and all this shit, and she told me stop throwing that away. Cause I just draw and throw it away. I get rid of it. Didn't mean much to me. And she was like, why don't you try? Why don't you focus and try and maybe make it a priority because you like it so much. Yeah. And that's when it really started to click. That's when I started, doing art on a larger scale. And then that's when I got back into comics. I went to film school, but I truly never thought of that. It was art to me, but it's too many hands in the pot to be art. It's a commodity. It's a trade. It's, so it wasn't until I got out of that and met my wife when I really think it really clicked. Okay, if I focus on this and take it seriously, that's when I started feeling like an artist, I guess.
Yeah.
I started considering myself one.
Yeah, it's wonderful to hear. I mean, I know my partner Jenny and I, like, a large part of our life, like, as far as is filled by art. Like going out for music, going to museums, doing things related to the show, taking photographs, and it's one of the big pieces that I've enjoyed in the Portland area. I grew up out in Rhode Island, and I had good comic shops as a kid. Like, there were more comic shops back then. In places like Providence, it's like fucking art city. So I was in a good spot. However, I never knew until I moved out to Portland. I'm like in Portland and LA, I'm like, everybody's fucking out here. Like, everybody, like, great comic creators and publishers and stuff all over the place. So I was just really overwhelmed. And I think both my interest and open up to art and the environment I was in, I was like, yeah,
Sure.
and started creating a podcast and painting. And I'm like, I love this flow. Like, whatever it is, I like living this way. And for me, it's only been the last few years, but it's like, once it happened, I knew it happened.
Hmm.
Adding on to that, Keenan, and I'll ask you this in a second, Alex.
Yeah.
But what is art? What do you think art is, Keenan? Comic books have this, not to throw in and queer up the question a bit, but, comic books have this weird cultural kind of, history, and as art objects or pulp or what have you. But for you, what is art for you, Keenan?
Well, yeah, that's like the question, right? Sometimes I think like Joseph Beuys, and I think everything is art. And then I see some art and I'm like, well, that's not art. So I do have a structure in my head, but it's very undefined. For me, art is expression and communication. That's like down to its basic form. That's why I'm doing it. Even if I do something I don't show anybody else, I'm trying to get something out of me and say something. And the communication doesn't have to be with other people. It can be just with myself sometimes, but it's important to communicate through emotion. But yeah, that's, and the interesting thing, that question will get a different answer from every single person you ask. So that's why it's
Yeah.
an interesting question, right?
Yeah. Thank you. Alex, for you,
Yeah.
what's art?
I think a lot of times for me personally, creating, it's creation with intent a lot. And like Keenan was saying as well, communication, it is something that, for a creator, it's kind of like this is a thing that I have to get out of me into the world, or maybe not necessarily into the world, but maybe onto a wall, or, just something that is in you that you need to put out there it's not there yet in the world, maybe, or not in the form you would like it to be. So a lot of it is, just the creation process. It's, there's an intent, there's a thing. It's like, why do I sit here reading these comics, looking for inspiration, or how did this person do this? Because it's like, well, I see a panel or something like that I can do, or I want to do, but I also want to have some references, and how did this person go about it? How does that work? It's all sorts of processing things, looking at things, and then being like, okay, I think I have the information maybe to create this thing that I want to put out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I tell you, one of the things about in asking the comics question, it just popped into my head, but I think it was like, around like the status of comics. I remember this absolutely fantastic exhibition. It was like Masters of American Comics, and I was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin at the time, and it was,
Uh-huh.
here's
Yeah,
our
it's a great show.
installation, right? Like Little Nemo and Slumberland,
Wow.
more
Frank
modern
Panther
stuff.
pages, Jimbo pages. They had Harvey Kurtzman war pages, like all sorts.
Kirby.
Yeah, so
Yep.
much cool stuff. That was a great show.
And what was amazing for me is like, I think, I think about comics like way too much, like people are into comics like throughout my life. But it was like, being in the institution setting, like for me, it was like comics are always like, it's our thing, right? It's like our thing. And seeing this more cultural exposure, and it's like the art question is like, Jack Kirby's panels are this big. They're in the art museum. We all fucking love them, and it's obvious that they're art, but there's something like about the institution and the majesty, and just made me think a lot about, like, you know, is this underground? Is this all accepted? But it just transformed me, and I still remember the volume and seeing those type of things in that context. For you, when you see that, when you see the recognition of the things that you do, comics, pulp history, or funny books, and everybody's mom threw them out. What do you think about when you see the whether it's a raise in stature of seeing comic books and comic book art in the finest institutions?
Well, for most cartoonists, it was art when it was on the page to begin with. Like when it was badly colored on newsprint, off registry, it was still art. So for me, it's that I love going to see those shows. I love that they exist, that I go see them as a cartoonist to be able to see the work, but the validation I give two shits about from like an art world perspective, because they've always been great artists to me. And it always has been the highest of art. It is, sequential storytelling, and these are some of the great masters of it. So it is like, and I love that show. It's one of the best comic book shows, one of the best art shows I'd ever been to when it was here in LA. And I got the book still on my shelf. It's a great show.
I love that book. I can see it right now. Alex, thoughts on that? Thoughts on that? If that exhibition, or like
I've been to a couple comic art exhibitions, and it always feels like, okay, great. I love looking at all that stuff, and I think it should be readily available. I think it's great that companies are doing like artist editions or gallery editions, so you can actually see all these original pages that you'll never be able to afford, and maybe you won't ever see outside of these things. I think that's great information, especially for somebody who says, how did they do that? How do I break this down? Oh, see all these notations. Comic books are a uniquely American art form that's, everywhere now, and everybody has their interpretation of them. But the language started here in a lot of ways. And to see the history, I love history to begin with. And the history of American comics is fascinating. So, there's tons of heroes and villains along the way, but it's just a really intriguing thing. And if somebody's casually interested, that's a great rabbit hole to go down. But yeah, me going to an art exhibit of comic pages, or, a local creator who's having a show somewhere, I love seeing that validation for them, or for these artists who, I was reading a book about Kurt Schaffenberger, who did a lot of Lois Lane's and Jimmy Olsen's and Superman's for a period. That guy's work is phenomenal, but, he's talking about people coming up to him and saying, like, I love your work, all this stuff. He's thinking like, that was just a job, that was just something I did. And it's because, nobody gave them that then. They're just like, I need 20 pages by tomorrow, that kind of stuff. But so it's, now we're able to look at it through those lens, whereas the original creators, while they're making it, they know what they're doing, but they also know that this is the job, and you got to bang them out. So there's a nice perspective to have on it now when you get to see these amazing original pieces at galleries or different traveling shows. It's cool that it's valued enough that people are saying, hey, we can get people in to see this now, versus before, when you're, the 80s, where they're like, but is it art? So I don't think those discussions are really happening anymore, which is great. I used to just pull out a few different books and be like, what do you think of this one? What do you think of that? Is that not art? So it's nice to see the recognition from the communities when it happens.
Yeah. in talking about in talking about the comics culture, and one of the pieces for me is one of the things recently in being in areas or finding independent expos, talking about zines,
Mhm.
like really like just an expansion of my world, because I was connected to comics, and then with zines I went to Quimby's bookstore and
Oh yeah.
in Chicago. I happened upon it, right? I literally happened upon it. I was newer to like, tracking down zines or what is this thing? Like I was stopping when I went to Powell's Books and being like, what is this pile of great shit? Right. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
and then I'm walking around Quimby. I go in and I'm like, like a surreal like aspect. I'm like, wait a second. Like those three walls are zines. Like, and it was just, it like, subtopics and everything, talk about a
Yeah.
wonderful experience. And
Yeah.
for the podcast we only have one issue. It's been tough to put out, but there is a podcast zine, issue 1 I can email to you or any listeners who are
Nice.
interested. But I think part of my saying it like around the art question is that I ended up in a spot where I was like, oh, I want to look at small press. I'm not going to walk past that. Oh, in the bookstore in Portland, like this section is sizable and like cool, and there's some good used copies. And for me, I think just by habit, like throughout life, sometimes you walk past the cool stuff, right? Like like, or I was in the habit sometimes of not noticing.
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
if it's not
what was
something
there?
you notice really, if it's sometimes your brain needs to make a connection to something to even sort of acknowledge that it's on the shelf. If you're walking past things that you don't really have any information about, you're just kind of like, okay, but that's something over there I recognize.
Keenan, you down in Los Angeles area, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, I recently interviewed uh, an artist who did Garage Girls, which is I found that at Floating World. And sometimes when I talk to artists from different areas, just is what. And this is a humble question, but is there anything particular about the Los Angeles like comics space as opposed to say up here in Portland or Seattle? Just peculiarities or differences you notice?
Well, what used to be Portland had a scene and LA didn't, but now LA is starting to have little groupings of like comic book areas that are cultivating scenes. But I think I'm aging out of understanding or knowing any of that shit at this point, anyhow, So um, I tried to do several events here to try to like cultivate and or like create a space for the weirdo indie freaks to have a place to show. And I've done that several times, and I went up to Portland and did it too, and I did in San Francisco and in the OC as well. I'm not sure if I'm going to continue to do that, but
It's a
difference
permanent
wise, the only
damage.
difference is I wish LA had more cartoonists that all my friends are spread out all over America. I only got like Tom Neely and a couple handful of other people that are cartoonists that I hang out with in LA, even though there's a ton. And most of that's just because of how big LA is.
Yeah. Alex.
As far as scenes,
Yeah, well, just your feel for it, and I like to get that piece. And like I said, I was wowed and blown over by it. But
Yeah.
like, what's it mean to you? Yeah.
I've kind of always been one of those people that I've always been on my own with creating for the most part. And for better or for worse, that's just how it's usually been. There was a time in Portland prior to the pandemic that myself and a number of cartoonists in town here would do a drawing group. And it was typically Sunday nights. You get together, draw, listen to records, and shoot the shit. And that was awesome. That's as close to anything like that as far as being involved in a scene as it's ever been for me. But it was totally awesome. I miss those days, but there just isn't a space for it right now, or a new space hasn't presented itself yet. But I also, being around here as long as I have been, I, can go into places and see friends and that kind of stuff, and, run into people here and there. But everything's kind of just like Keenan was saying. I don't know. It's more spread out now. It's kind of thing where I don't know that everybody's thinking about getting together very much. It's just kind of like see you when I see you usually. But I do miss those drawing days where we'd get together. Those were good, and good for kind of getting some feedback from other creators too. It was a good experience.
Yeah. All right. Let me just throw it at you. The question, Keenan, why is there something rather than nothing?
Because I don't believe in nothing. I don't think there's like the absence of something is nothing, but there's always something.
Yeah. Yeah. Alex.
You have to do something. You have to make something happen. It's kind of like life in many ways. It's like nothing will happen if you aren't involved in your own world to some degree. You can sit there in front of the TV forever and nothing will happen except images will flash across your face. But, I don't think that humans are geared that way. I think you're innately geared to do something, and for some people it's creating things. For some people it's doing other terrible things. But yeah, that's one of the things that I'm geared to do always is like, thinking about things and what am I working on? There's so much mental work that goes into things before anything exists for creators. So that's a lot of my somethings.
Thank you. Hey, Keenan, we mentioned a few times the humans, and I've been saying it as a title, and maybe the listeners don't know that much about it. It's an experience. The humans is an absolute experience. It stands amongst on its own. I often talk about on the show, local bookshop, Browser's bookstore here. And when I get these great things, I make sure to get them there to get them out in the Albany, Oregon area. So there's a copy of The Humans there, and actually zines by Alex and Keenan at Browser's. But awesome. Tell us, I want to hear from your words, and this is an indulgence. Like, who are the humans? What is the humans?
The humans are a ape biker gang on the road to oblivion who fight, fuck, and run drugs. It's basically the story is like boiling down is Planet of the Apes meets Easy Rider or Wild Angels, really is what. But it's a biker gang exploitation. Or ape exploitation is what we named it. And it's Tom and I just got to have a lot of fun with that. Tom did some of the best work he's ever done doing those pages, and some of the new stuff that he's done looks really good too. So I'm hopefully excited about that as well. But the Jungle was the Image Comics series, ran 10 issues, and there's hopefully going to be a sequel sometime in the near future. So.
Oh, that's lovely to hear, Alex. The derelict. Same question. Like mentioned a couple times. Jumped out at me. Jumped out at Keenan probably when he saw it in the comic shop. Totally. Who's the derelict? Who's the derelict?
The derelict is a homeless addict named Johnny, and basically the story is you're just kind of with him, and you meet a lot of the characters that are in his life. Some interesting characters from his past that have popped up. The last 2 issues I've done have just been standalones where it's just him and his world. So it's a lot of back alleys and garbage dumps and things like that. But he's somebody to root for, I feel, sometimes. You want to see decent things happen for him, but he's just a fucking loser. Yeah, he really is. And but he cracks me up.
Yeah, it's some great
a lot of
black
fun with
comedy.
Oh, well, and this, you're talking about something and nothing. You're gonna have nothing. Or you could have something. You could have the humans. You can have the derelict. That's why we're talking.
Yep.
That's I just as you could tell, just really love the both of you work, and of course it was conspicuous to me
Thanks,
when
Ken.
you combined talents. Keenan, tell the listeners where to find your stuff, your art, how to encounter the things you create.
I got an Instagram. That's my name, Keenan Marshall Keller. And other than that, you can get Vengeance through Floating World Comics online, or you can order it through your shop. Just go ask them by name. It's in previews, and they can order it directly through Floating World as well. And yeah, other than that, you can see me at Short Run later this year. I'll be at Short Run with Alex tabling, and we'll have some cool shit.
November 1st. November 1st.
Yeah,
Wait,
November
2nd.
1st.
Oh,
November
November
1st is our signing at Floating World.
We got a lot going on that weekend.
Yeah,
it's going to be
Oh,
really
that's great weekend, Halloween weekend and such. Yeah, Alex, how do folks find you, the Derelict, your other creations?
Sure. Well, most of my books you can get at Floating World in Portland, Oregon, or you can go to my Instagram, which is Alex Delaney Art, and there's a link for my Etsy shop there, which is also Alex Delaney Art. There's comics and art through that link. I guess that's probably the easiest ways to do it. Where you can ask your comic store or shop to order Vengeances for the Living if they haven't done it already. So, or Floating World has your back on Vengeances for the Living as well. So, and man, just got those third issues in. They are big, man. They're great. There's a thick spine on it. And man, oh man. It's, if you like a book that feels good and smells like a comic book, damn, you're going to be having a good time.
You got that description. You got that description. Keenan might not know this. I'm a little bit south of Portland. I'm going up to Portland today, listeners and folks. Like, I am searching that smell, heading up to the Lloyd Center, Floating World Comics. I'm going to find anything I can. And the thing is, listeners, one thing that I found, because I've made this mistake before, when you see the works, Keenan or Alex or other independent creators, and they're in front of you or they're at a table, buy their stuff. The stuff sells out. I've seen a lot of people comment online, I'd like that first issue. I know they're going to put it back out. I didn't get a copy when I had a chance. Grab your copy. Support the independent publishers and Keenan and Alex, and just take advantage when it's in front of you, because it's gonna disappear, because other people like these pancakes as well. So I wanted to thank you both for coming on the show and talking comics and art. And it's a distinct pleasure for me. And really, both your work really stands out. Fun. There's a feeling in comics sometimes where it's like, can they get away with this? Can I get away with this? Should I be looking at it? And you get in there. You get in, like, into the bizarro world or whatever the yayas are in your head, and like there's good space for me mentally in the lands you create. So wanted to thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
Best of luck with upcoming ventures. Everybody check out Keenan Marshall Keller's, Alex Delaney's work. If you're in the Portland area, even swing by the wonderful changing mall of the Lloyd Center and visit Floating World Comics, which support great creators like this. Thanks, everybody.
This is Something Rather Than Nothing.
And listeners, to stay connected with us and our guests, visit somethingratherthannothing.com. Join our mailing list for exclusive updates and access to guest-created art. If you enjoyed this episode or any episode, please like, subscribe, leave a review on your podcast platform. People really read that shit. Your support helps us reach more listeners and spread our community across the planet. This is a global show, and we like to give a shout out to our many listeners across the world, including many listeners in Canada, Spain, Germany, UK, Argentina, Brazil, India, Thailand, and so many more places. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Something Rather Than Nothing Podcast for behind-the-scenes content. And the best way to help the show is to tell your friends about us. If you love it, they'll love it too. Tell your friends who love it. We love you. This is Something Rather Than Nothing Podcast.